on, let's do this thing. So lovely to see you. Thank you for coming to this live recording of Wanderful. What you say is wonderful. Well, it is the podcast that we do. We're in our 5th season. Isn't that right, Andrew? 5th season. And it's not just members of my family that listen to it. We've actually got, who have we had? We've got a whole roster of people, haven't we? Yes, good. We'll come back to you. But anyway, you can check out what we're doing on Wanderful at wanderfulpodcast.com. Super helpful if you can like, subscribe, and all that kind of good stuff. But essentially the idea of Wanderful is it's an excuse for me to talk to great people. And we have conversations, and then it's designed to be listened to as you wander about. And so what would happen is we have a conversation, and then we take a little splinter of wonderfulness from the conversation and turn it into a walking exercise. I advise it. You should enjoy it. Tonight's episode has a very special guest, Honoré. Woo! You know Honoré, right? So Carl is a distinguished, highly successful, proper writer. He's written 2 real groundbreaking books. Praise of Slow. Yes, he's the guru of slow. He's a maestro of parenting, and he's the god of the latest book he's brought out. It's called Bolder. Bolder as in getting bolder as you get older. And not just that. It is about making the very most of our longer lives. And we'll be talking a little bit about that this evening. Carl Honoré is with us. Fantastic. You're a very obedient audience. This is what a live podcast sounds like. Great. We will be talking about, not just about age, but this is my birthday week, I will say that. Woo! So this seemed to be appropriate time. There will also be music. We'll be hearing some music. We have some special musical guests. And we would invite you to drink, nibble. They've taken the crisps off the table because apparently the crisps are too noisy for a podcast. You have to suck your crisp at this podcast. And we will have a good time together. Some of you will know this room and have seen me in it in Propera. Some of you will know in Propera. Some of you are devotees. Hello, David. Has a season ticket. And you will recognize Anthony Ingle. Anthony Ingle is our amazing MD, and he also has a birthday today. His punishment for having a birthday today is to come and to accompany me. I'll be singing a bit later, but what we'd like you to do, Anthony, and we say this in a kind of British passive-aggressive way, we'd love you to, i.e. get on stage, please. And what we'd like to do is to celebrate your birthday by giving us an improvisation. Yes. Yeah. Now, what would be a song that you would like to have sung to you on your birthday? Anyone? We're not doing Happy Birthday because it's too obvious, but a song.
You're getting more beautiful every day.
I mean, a real song. This is Fiona, who's also in the company, is also my singing teacher, and is improvising. She's there. She's ready to go. But an actual song, The Sun Has Got His Hat On, and do we know how that goes? The sun has got his hat on, and he's coming out to play. Indeed. Now those of you who've been to Proper know the score here. This is not a modern tune. This was actually composed 200 years or so ago by which composer originally? Vivaldi is correct. Now Vivaldi was an talented composer, but a lazy bastard, and didn't finish it, left it lying around until the kind of Romantic era when it was continued by another composer called?
Brahms.
Brahms is correct. And Brahms was right at the point of finishing it, died, left it on a windowsill, and it was finally completed in the 20th century by which composer? Stockhausen is correct. So, it is time to hear the true musical chronology of The Sun Has Got His Hat On, starting with Vivaldi, via Brahms to Stockhausen. Anthony Ingle, happy birthday to you. Woo-hoo! Woo! Thank you. Bravo! He just keeps getting better and better. The ageless Anthony Ingle. You see what I'm doing here? I'm providing a link to get us back to you. Thank you, Anthony. We'll be performing again a bit later. I have to fess up that one of the reasons that we're here is due to a conversation I was having with this man at a cafe. And I had mentioned to him that I lost my voice in COVID. I had COVID quite badly, and I got lumps on my vocal cords. And for a year, I couldn't sing. And nobody seemed to mind. I have to say, nobody came and said, but it is the nation needs your voice. There was none of that. My kids, no one. However, I thought I'd have it looked at, and Fiona, who teaches me singing over there, was kind of nudged me to the singing surgeon. Dermot, the singing surgeon, he took the nodules out, and then I thought, I haven't had a singing lesson for decades. I've been singing since I was 8, but I've never really learned much. And Fiona was kind enough to give me some singing lessons, and it was very humbling, and it was very wonderful to start to learn to speak, because there was a long period of not speaking, and then Fee introduced me to the fantastic Jen, who's sitting there, also got my body under control. And the last year has been an incredible exploration for me about a new way of singing and falling in love with singing again and so on. And I was saying this to Carl, and Carl said, that sounds like a Boulder story. So I said, well, why don't we get together, talk about Boulder, talk about getting bolder as you get older, and maybe I'll sing something. Carl, thank you for the inspiration, and thank you for coming.
I'm thrilled to be here.
So Carl, what we'll do is something a bit formal to start, and then it's going to get riotous. We'll involve everybody, and but let's start formally. And let me ask you, Carl. You wrote. I've known you for years as the guru of slow. You wrote the book In Praise of Slow. You're known around the world for that. Why a book on? Is it a book on aging?
It is. I suppose it's a book on how we feel about aging as much as aging itself. Why? I think I've discovered somewhere along the line in my writing career that all of my books start with a personal existential crisis, right? So some sort of spark. And with Boulder, it was that I was playing in a hockey tournament in the north of England, and my team, who were called the London Jets, we were locked in a 0-0 draw with a rival that we had annihilated the year before, but we just couldn't get that goal.
You're the London Jets.
Yeah, I know, it sounds very
That sounds great.
It
sounds. Tell us, what does the strip look like?
Well, it's green.
Okay.
Very, very bold green.
Okay.
And a stark white.
Okay, the London Jets.
Yeah.
And this is hockey.
With some Jets.
Okay.
Well, because I'm Canadian, right, it's actually ball hockey, which is a bit like ice hockey without the ice.
Right,
So you're running around on feet. It's the same sport otherwise, right? And so we're playing that we couldn't score. So out of nowhere, I scored a kind of highlight reel goal, right? The kind of goal that I will be reliving on my deathbed with goosebumps many years from now, and propelled my team into the semifinals. And I came off thinking, I am the bee's knees, right? I was floating on air. And then out of nowhere, one of the tournament organizers sidled up to me and he said, "Wonderful goal. But you know what? I've just been flicking through player profiles just for fun in between matches, and I noticed that you're the oldest player here." And I knew I was one of the oldest, right? Not in denial. But to be suddenly the oldest out of 245 players or something, it just completely rocked me. And I don't know, in the blink of an eye, I went from goal scorer to granddad. And it was, all these questions began crowding in. I was thinking, well, are people laughing at me behind my back? Do I look out of place here? Should I take up a more age-appropriate pastime like bingo, maybe? and I've got nothing against bingo, but I prefer hockey at this stage of my life. It was just something, it was like my age took on this terrible power in an instant to define and limit me. And I thought, this can't be right, I'm having fun, I'm playing well. Why do I suddenly feel constrained, boxed in? Why do I feel a door is being slammed in my face because of the numbers on my birth certificate? And I came away from that tournament thinking, I need to unspool this somehow, and I could feel a book was coming. Because I felt there had to be a different and a better story to tell about aging. And it turns out, spoiler alert, that there is.
Yeah, the book is it's hugely encouraging for those of us who are getting older. I suppose everyone's getting older. Whatever your starting point is. But there's lots of information there about how you sort of sort of bust some myths about aging in terms of our thinking, our creativity, our sex lives and so on. Are there any, give us a flavour of some of the moments where there's some of the people you met maybe that just kind of threw your understanding of aging on its head?
Yeah, I mean, one person who really stood out for me was a woman called Jacko, who was in her mid-80s. She was running a guest house in Beirut, and she was just discovered in her early to mid-80s and became a reality TV star, right? So she, Candid Camera, Jeremy Beadle, all that stuff. So she became a comic phenomenon across the Arab world. And she just had such a glorious sense of the absurd and humor. And I happened to meet her. I was the last person, just by chance, to interview her because she was dying. And she still had this mischievous sparkle.
She's the one that went in with
the most famous one. The most famous sketch she did was she was dressed up as an elderly woman in a house coat, and she goes into a pharmacy in Beirut and asks in a loud voice for Viagra, right? And the pharmacist who's in on the joke gives her a look of horror and says, "Are you sure, Viagra?" And she says, "Yes, it's for my husband." And then it goes on. She says, "Can he take a double dose?" And it goes on and on. And all of the reactions of the people in the pharmacy who are not in on the joke are just comedy gold, right? They look just absolutely appalled at the idea of anyone that age having anything remotely like sex. And so then so she became a superstar off the back of this. And then I remember being with her towards the end of our conversation, and she just said, the only thing about aging is you just have to make the most of whatever age you are. And if that doesn't work, go down to the pharmacy and get yourself some Viagra, right? Yeah. And that was really the last thing she said to me. And then I just heard about 5 days later she died. And it just seemed like she had gone out, not raging against the dying of the light, but kind of laughing at the dying of the light. And I thought that was a pretty uplifting way to go through life.
You talk about ageism in the books. Say more about that, because it seems that ageism can affect you at any age. It's not about people getting older. It's people thinking, we've asked you guys to fill in, this questionnaire about what do you feel too young for, what do you feel too old for. Say a bit about that, what you might, you've discovered about.
Yeah, I mean, ageism does affect all of us at every age, because what it does is it says all the people who have this birth date roughly fall into this box, right? They tick all of these different character traits, which is, immensely limiting and untrue, because people can be, you can find vast differences between two 85-year-olds, right? There's an old saying in the medical world, if you've met an 85-year-old, you've met an 85-year-old, right? It's not, you haven't met all 85-year-olds by meeting an 85-year-old. So the thing about ageism, though, of course, that falls more heavily on those of us in later life, right? Because it has got tangled up with the cult of youth, the idea that younger is just better, that aging is almost seen, I think, especially in Western cultures, it's seen as something to be ashamed of or feel guilty about or disgusted by. And to deny, right? I mean, it's interesting, we were asking these questions here, what age do people feel? And of course, there's some research came out recently saying that once people get past the age of 40, they tend to think of themselves on average as 20 years younger than they actually are. And I think the reason we have that phenomenon is that we're trying to run away from the age we are. We feel ashamed to be 45 or 55 or 65, so we tell ourselves somehow that we're 35 still, or we're 29, or we're young at heart. I mean, it's woven into our vernacular, all these phrases that just tell us constantly, the wrong side of 40, or over the hill, or one of my real bugbear expressions is showing my age. It just slips in everywhere. I heard one of the well-known BBC correspondent said it this morning in an interview on the Today program. He was talking about remembering a political thing that had happened in the early 90s, and he just kicked off by saying, I'm really showing my age here, but back in the early 90s, you think, well, what are you doing when you say that? What you're saying is that I'm showing my age, you're saying, I'm older, I'm ashamed of it, so I've got to put it out there, right? And almost apologize for it. So I sort of feel like language is a good starting point often for taking down the ageist industrial complex. So I feel like if you want to flip showing my age, we should be showing off my age. Because what he should be saying and trumpeting in that moment, that correspondent, is, I was there. I can bring to the discussion now a whole range of filters and nuance and understanding, because I actually lived something similar 30 years ago, rather than holding up his age as something to be ashamed of, like having, herpes or finding out that your most listened to artist on Spotify is Richard Clayderman, right? I mean, it's just this idea that somehow aging. It's not as bad as that, I suppose.
But you pointed a really good one out to me. I noticed in the book, which is still. Are you still?
Yes.
This idea that there's this kind of little barb in there. That you still doing that as though there's an assumption about when you should stop.
I think that was J.K. Galbraith, wasn't it? Right. A great economist who said that. He called it the still syndrome. Okay. And it creeps in at some point, depending on what the activity is. I suppose it could be anywhere from your mid-30s onwards. You start saying, yeah, I'm still playing hockey, or I'm still singing, or I'm still dancing in nightclubs, that kind of thing. What does that say? It says, somehow I ought not to be, or there's some miracle of nature, you're an aberration because you're doing this thing that you love and do well, but your birth certificate tells you otherwise. Yeah. That kind of business.
I don't know anyone else is having this experience, but I think Jo isn't, my wife isn't here. She's with her two late 80-year-old parents. We've got a 90-year-old parent. The old people seem to be older, and they are living longer. But they it seems as though we gained a decade or something in a generation. And you talk a lot about intergenerational activity. Say a bit more about that, places where both the young and the old benefit from interaction.
Well, I think the benefits are legion, and we've really thrown, I think, that baby out with the bathwater throughout human history. The generations mixed. So if you think back to the past, people of all different ages would mingle in the fields, in markets, in the home, in the street, just everywhere, right? And then we moved into the modern era and we siloed. So you find yourself really walled off with people of your own age cohort. And it starts in school, right? You're actually literally with people who are born within a 9-month period of you, or a year at the most. And what that does is it means that people are separated from people of different ages. And when you don't know people of different ages, that into that space rush all of the grim, toxic stereotypes about aging, right? And what they do find is as soon as you start breaking down the silos and mixing people up, that the stereotypes begin to fall away. You realize that not all 23-year-olds are snowflakes, right? Or not all 85-year-olds are cranky and forgetful, right? And it's just having people in that same space together, I think is always a quantum leap. Reimagining aging for all of us, right?
It's funny because in this room there's some people, friends of ours, who have many years ago thought, you know what, why don't we create a village school? The idea being that we had kids of different ages and that they might learn more from each other than, how was it? I'm going to ask, what was it like? Someone say something, so not just listening to us guys. What was it like to have, not you, Nadav, what was it like to have, yes, Poppy, look at Danny. What was village school like? What, any surprises that you found when we were all learning? The idea was that we would all do stuff that none of us knew how to do.
Yeah, well, we did drumming, we did sculpting, we did all sorts of chocolate making. Yeah. We trod on grapes, picked grapes. Maybe.
Druidism, I remember, was one.
We did a druid. We did lots of things, and what's fascinating now, looking back over what must be 16, 17 years, I don't know when we started it, is that we're all incredibly bonded as 3-4 families, and the kids are so delighted to come to an evening with the adults. So it's really been a profound, and we feel like family now.
In fact, you're all sitting together. Podcast audience, you cannot see this, but they are bonded together.
Multi-generational table.
One of the really big themes, though, was that we learnt at the same pace as each other. So the young would learn how to make chocolate as well as the old, as well as the very old, and there were no privileges of being an adult. And there were no advantages of being the young. And that was almost every single other activity we ever did, there were advantages of being one or the other. Yeah. And we chose things where there weren't, and that was the great joy of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's also, it was interesting to see how we infantilize kids and how family activities are very often about the parents stand back and they provide something for children. But in fact, families learning and growing together is a thing. I noticed that I've got this kind of ticking feeling that talking about learning stuff, and I've talked about learning singing, and I thought maybe I should
show us what you've learned, maybe?
Well, yeah, I think it might be time. So, is that okay? I feel
think so.
quite nervous. I've sung many, many times in this hall, but it feels slightly different. So, I would love to share with you a song, which hopefully, Fiona, I won't let you down. But it feels like I've sung all my life, but it feels like in the last year, things sort of clicked into place. It doesn't sound like I'm used to sounding to myself, but it's almost like there's been some other voice trying to sing. So we'll give it a go. Does that make sense? It's going to be a song a beautiful song from an aria from an opera by a man called Korngold, Eric Korngold, called The Dead City. And in it, Piero, there's a character, Piero, who sings about well, like all men are always singing about how women have let them down. So basically he's talking about love. If you're interested, we've done a sort of translation that you could look at. And also, David, my friend David Glass is here. And I just want, Piero, this is a bit for you as well, because David has been one of the great teachers of my life. And the first time I ever saw him was on a stage very much like this, doing a show about Piero, and I fell in love with theatre, him, and Piero. So there's a little bit of that. Thank you for coming. I didn't know you'd be here, so it's fantastic you're here. Let's do this thing, yes?
This is the first time I've ever read music on this stage.
He can read music, yeah. Mein Venen, es träumt sich zurück. Im Tanze gewann ich, verlor ich mein Glück. Im Tanze am Rhein, beim Mondenschein, gestand mir's aus Blauauge ein inniger Blick, gestand mir's ihr betend Wort. O geh mir nicht fort, mein wahren Heimat, still blühendes Glück, mein Sehnen, mein Wehnen, es träumt sich zurück. Zauber der Ferne warf in der Seele den Brand. Aber der Tanze lockte dein Komödiant. Vor ihr der Wundersüßen Welt und der Tränen Küssen. Rauschend Not, Wahn und Krieg, ach, das ist Gaukles Geschick. streuen sich zurück. So
you are a poster boy for Boulder. I'd love to ask. I mean, straight off the stage. I mean, what does that feel like to get up? I mean, you must have been putting that moment through your head.
It's very nerve-wracking, even though I know and love everyone in this room and know most people's middle name. There's something, so the stakes couldn't be lower, one sense, but in another way, it feels very, very exposing, because it feels, in a good way, it's, I think opera gets a kind of a rap for being artificial and kind of overblown. But for me, when I first heard that song, which is actually a baritone aria, I actually wept. I just thought, well, I mean, again, you almost have to excuse yourself. It's a little bit of age, like it's sentimental, yeah? But there for me is something in that music, and in German, which I started to learn now, because I was always an Italian boy, and but now I'm on my Duolingo doing my learning, and there's something calling me in this act, which is very, it's European, quite German, and there's something in that music that feels to me real. And I remember as a little kid, when I first went to the opera, I was 8, and I heard Domingo sing and stuff, and it didn't seem artificial, it sounded very real. So this for me it's obviously strange, it's very formalized, but it feels real. And it's interesting, people say I've got a young sounding voice. Yeah, I mean, we have a mutual colleague, Fiona, who said, he said he heard my voice and said, well, he's obviously over 6 foot. How the hell can you tell that? But, it's interesting learning as a beginner something which at one level, I mean, I've already sung in the opera. In a way, I've ticked the box, but there's something in me. I don't know if anyone else has got this feeling. There's a kind of, it's like there's a gnawing third leg that's kind of urging you on. It's not about career. It's not about money. It's almost not about the ego in a weird way. We spent the afternoon recording these songs. So I thought, even if I fuck it up tonight, I'm gonna record it just to see what it's like. So it feels more like meeting oneself. It sounds a bit difficult to understand, but it feels like, oh, it wants to do this. So it's interesting.
That's
very
interesting. There's one of my favorite quotes about aging is from David Bowie, who said that aging is an extraordinary experience whereby you become the person you always should have been. And just what you were saying there, I felt like you were coming to some sort of, not full circle, but you were coming to a place that you couldn't have come to 25 years ago.
For sure. I'm going to do something naughty and ask my teacher, not how that was.
For a score.
But what did you see early on when I was unable to speak, actually? I'm not looking for flattery, I'm just curious. You knew me as a colleague, and there was I starting for scratch. Did you notice anything or anything you thought at the time?
Yeah, it was, I mean, the experience of working with someone who has just come out of a vocal surgery and literally is unable to speak for a number of days. And then the relearning, there was something very vulnerable about that. You know, the first ever lesson I taught you, I think you managed sort of a tone, 2 tones, maybe a third we did. Yeah, I thought maybe that was too much. And the experience of relearning or witnessing you relearning something was a very profound one for me, you know. And I could see also a fire in your eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
Jen's nodding, because she's also been a huge part of your vocal recovery, and she sees the fire, right? Yeah.
Jen's a hero, by the way. Anything that you've got wrong with anything, go to Jen. She's just absolutely amazing. Jen, you're a sort of performance osteopath. You work with performers in the West End. How do you describe yourself?
I'm a performance physiotherapist. I see any range of like joint, muscle, nerve-linked injuries, but also do vocal physio. And we've done a bit of a mishmash together, haven't we?
She got hold of my throat like no one has ever done. I mean, it's an experience that, I mean, wow, unforgettable to have someone grab hold of your larynx and go, but I trusted you, and it works. What's your range of your patients? I mean, in terms of age range?
So it's quite, the youngest that I would see, 16, and then to any age. I like seeing people from a mix of backgrounds as well. So with the vocal physio, that's anyone from singers to teachers to just people who just want to be able to speak well and maybe haven't got that quality because of tightness, or they're working with a vocal coach, or whatever the reason. So yeah, lots of variety.
How do you, does age come into your thinking at all in terms of how you assess people?
I think age comes in more in a sense of experience as opposed to limitation. I think a lot of people will come to physio and be like, I can't do this because I'm only this years old, or I'm too old to do. But within, if you had a room of the same ages of people that had just been across different walks of life, they present completely differently. So it's nice to be able to just tweak that for people and go, yeah, kind of irrelevant. It's more about what your body's doing, or what you've been through, or how your understanding matches the task.
All I can say is being taught to, not only did I learn to sing from scratch, I've been working with Jen on learning how to walk. And it's like, I should know this, but like, you do that, and then this goes, and walking slowly is humiliating. You're sort of wobbling all over the place. But I actually also think I notice I love it. Other people I'm sure feel the same, that your body just goes, and your soul goes, I want to learn. I'm really enjoying learning this simple thing. Thank you, thank you both for your help getting me, I mean, honestly, really, getting me back on.
Oh, yeah.
Shirts, really. What do you hear, Carl?
I noticed you said that someone said that you describe your voice as young.
Yeah.
What did you hear that? Did you hear young equals good, or young equals a different tonal quality?
Well, there is a whole thing in the performing arts which is lie about your age, right? And I haven't said what my birthday is this week, and I may not. We'll see. Anyway, no, but there is. I think it's sounding young is a good thing, and the truth is.
Why?
That's a very good question. Well, I had a conversation with Janet, who isn't here tonight. She was coming, but she was saying actually that there's a lot of kudos. There's a lot of power, of course, in voices that are not pretty and young and sort of, but they've actually lived a bit. And I think opera might be quite a cruel, limited art form. It's very pernickety. So I think young means we'll get a lot of use out of this voice. But actually, when you're listening to the voices that move you and touch you, very often have got all sorts of
idiosyncrasies.
Yeah. And lived in.
My father is a huge opera fan, and has always sung his whole life as well. He was a pathologist, retired pathologist, but carries on singing now. He's going to be 88 this year, and his voice has evolved.
Yeah.
And he's a tenor. It used to be quite heavy and powerful. Now it's a bit softer, and I think in the last few years it's become sweeter.
Yeah.
It's got a lovely quality to it. So it's older, I suppose. Would it be older? But it's more beautiful, or is it differently beautiful? I mean, it kind of brings us to some of these questions about what are we bringing to the party when we say this is young and this is old, and what are all the baggage that comes along with it?
It's a really good point. 63, by the way. And you hope to God when you say I'm 63 that someone has an intake of breath and goes, really? Yeah. Not, yeah, we thought that's probably about DNA. I think I've got good DNA. We're talking about limitations and overcoming them, and I wanted to switch slightly because it's my birthday and I can do what I like. And I met somebody really amazing only a couple of weeks ago. I met her in the front room of my friend Nadav and Nicole, who she isn't here, and her name is Holly. And she is challenging all sorts of limitations. One very obvious one is, we're having a kind of musical evening in this beautiful theatre, but Holly thinks that you can have the equally beautiful evening in your front room. And she created and runs Concerts Don't Cost the Earth, and she's come here to talk and to play to us. Holly, thank you so much for coming. Holly Cullen-Davis is here. Before you play, Holly, you might want to change the height of the stool, obviously, because I think you and Anthony are just...
Ironically, I like it lower, even though I'm smaller. There we go.
So, before you play, perhaps you just tell us a bit about Concerts Don't Cost the Earth.
Sure. Well, you came to one. So Concerts Don't Cost the Earth is concerts in people's living rooms. So, there are other series like that as well, like So Far Sounds. So if you know So Far Sounds, it's something slightly similar. However, it's classical. And hopefully you'll understand the pun in the title. So Concerts Don't Cost the Earth. They don't cost a lot of money, but it's an environmental concert series. And so it's bringing together my two loves, which are music and doing something about the planet and the climate crisis.
Well, thank you for coming. Would you?
I can start by playing something.
Yeah, it'd be wonderful if you could. Thank you.
Beautiful.
What was that?
That That was a tune by Chick Corea. It's called Children's Song Number 6. He wrote a series of 20 children's songs. I learned it partly because I wanted to do a little bit of bridging the gap between classical and jazz. So whilst I'm first and foremost a classical pianist, and I won't pretend to be anything else, I really like to challenge audiences to kind of imagine crossing that boundary and kind of actually not having one or the other. Not, music doesn't have to be one or the other. So in all my programs that I do, I really try and throw lots of unusual things into the mix that people won't know about necessarily, won't probably have heard of. And therefore it might kind of just challenge their ideas about what classical music is. And so that's one of those.
I must admit, I was very moved by the concert, and I think it's, again, this is a kind of wheel full circle thing. I started in classical music, and I branched into other things, but there's something about it feels like coming home, and it feels fresh and very, very beautiful. Tell us a bit more about. You talk about challenging people. Tell us more about what's behind maybe concerts that Don't Cost the Earth and the challenges that really sort of you're passionate about.
Sure. So yeah, I think the challenge is definitely the environmental aspect of it, because I've been putting on concerts and making things happen and bringing people together my whole life, sort of, I don't know, since about 13, I think I started throwing parties and dinner parties and concerts, and that feels really natural and normal to me. So I've done lots of that, but in the last, I suppose, 5 years or so, I've felt a real calling to do something about the climate crisis. And I think, speaking of age, I turned 40 this year, and I feel fine about that, quite excited about that, and looking forward to my 40s. But I think it's a relevant age because the last 40 years is pretty much how long we've known about climate change and that humans are creating it. And so I grew up learning about it at school as quite a new thing, but something that was clearly a problem. And I grew up thinking, well, presumably the grown-ups will do something about this. And I've just seen my entire life, all through my adulthood, that whilst there might be some grown-ups trying to do something about it, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. The carbon emissions are rising. And, I've got my own children now, and I suppose I just felt an absolute urgency in the last few years. Well, I'm going to have to try and do something about this. And I feel really strongly that we should all be trying to do something about it, but it's how we do that, which is the big question. And we may, I suppose, come on to my partner, who is in prison at the moment for trying to do something about it. And I didn't feel that was a length I could go to. And I also felt perhaps that would be a waste of what I've got to give. So I think we've all got to find our gifts, basically, and try and incorporate them and not just say, well, this is what I do, so I'm not, somebody else can do that. So a scientist will sort that out. Well, the scientists are trying, but it's not working. So I think all of us really have to find our gift with what we do and incorporate it into. So that was really my urgency for setting it up.
Yeah. Would you mind how is Marcus doing?
So Marcus, my boyfriend, has been in Chelmsford prison for 5 months because of an action that he took climbing a bridge. And, challenging the system, challenging the economic system, challenging the politics, and being in what he calls civil resistance. And I support him absolutely in what he's doing, and he's doing really well. He's doing really, really well in prison, and I think, in a way that is part of his gift, is that he's able to tolerate that environment and actually make good of it, and speak to people in there and write to journalists out here and stay sane. And that's why, as well as what he actually did, I think more importantly it's worth him doing it, because now it's actually, it's having repercussions since, and he's making use of that time. So yeah, thank you, he's well.
Well, we'll hear more about how we can, if anyone wants to get involved or to have a concert, but please play something else.
Yeah. So I'm going to play a piece that I played at the concert that you came to.
Which I loved.
Yeah. And this is another one of those pieces that I feel like challenges boundaries and challenges people's expectations perhaps of what they like and don't like. And it was quite fun actually planning this concert for Nicole and Nadav, because I sent them my playlist before I did the concert. I said, here's what I'm going to play. You might want to just get used to what this sounds like in your home. And I could play it on Spotify. And Nadav was really worried. He was like, I don't know about that piece. So this is that piece.
I think this is one of Nadav's non-favourites, but too bad. It's my birthday. I wanted this one.
He changed his mind. That's the point. This is the third Danzas Argentinas by Canastera from Argentina.
Amazing. Got tears in my eyes. Before you leave the stage, how can, if anyone wants to get to know more about what you do or get involved, how could they do that?
There are 3 ways basically to get involved. So the first one is to donate. That would be really nice. So what happens with donations is they go straight to just making the organisation run and to pay the musicians that do it, of which I'm obviously one, but I've got a whole host of amazing musicians that I work with. But ideally musicians get paid for their work, so that's where donations go, and you can make a pledge, a one-off pledge, or you can become a patron, as David very kindly agreed to do, which means that you would give a monthly amount and just help the thing keep going. And then the second thing is that you can host a concert. So, and it really is, anybody can host a concert. You know, you can have a very, very small room and invite your neighbours round, or, you know, you can be somebody grand and you can have a really big space. And so we've got a really lovely mixture of people hosting and agreeing to bring the audiences in. And I think the great, well, there's a few nice things about hosting. If you're somebody that likes to, you know, throw an event, then it's just a really nice way to do that. But you're bringing people together, and that's what this is all about, is, you know, it's what I think we both really like to do, is, especially post-COVID, is bring people back together again to communicate and to face the truth about what is happening to our planet, but with love and with honesty. And what hosts do, which you will have seen, is that they choose where the proceeds of the evening go. So the people do pay for tickets to come to the concerts, and the host can choose the ticket price as well. So if you're a host that feels like your friends can only afford £10, then that's fine, and if your friends can afford £50, that's great. But you choose that price, and then you say to all the people in that room, I would be happy for the money to go here, and I would also be happy for the money to go here, and you give them 2 options, and they just have to be environmentally related. You know, so that it can be an activism movement, or it can be an amazing tree planting, you know, project in Africa, or it can be a law company that sues companies or the government for really, you know, ecocidal practice. So those are examples of, you know, what other people have suggested so far, and that encourages conversation, because the host says, yeah, so these are the 2 causes, and we'd like you to discuss in the breaks between all this lovely music that you're hearing, where you would want your money to go and why. And then at the end, the audience votes, and the money is split proportionately between those 2 causes according to how people vote. So it doesn't go all to one, it's where you vote, what you'll vote for is where your money goes. So that's how it works, and that's the second thing you can do. You can host, and of course, you know, thirdly, you can sign up to come to concerts and just come to concerts. So, yeah, and spread the word. And it's concertsdon'tcosttheearth.org.
Holly, thank you so much.
I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, Holly. First of all, I would love to have you come round and do a concert at my house, but we don't have a grand piano, even a small piano. How does that work?
That's a good point. So if it's me doing a concert, you need to have a piano.
Right.
She does mime piano, really.
And I do not, yes, and it doesn't have to be a grand piano. It can be an upright piano, but at the moment, yes, for piano concerts, unless you're prepared to hire in a piano, which is also, you know, an option for people who can afford it. It's not necessarily that expensive, actually, to hire in a piano, so that's an option.
Right.
Otherwise, you can have musicians that don't play the piano.
Yes.
That is such a thing.
That's a plan B. Plan B, that's the thing.
She's got banjo players, kazoo players.
Recorders. I wanted to ask you a question that was kind of connected to the whole conversation we're having before. We touched on the idea of the sort of magic of mixing up the generations, and you're obviously right out there on the front line of activism, climate change, and so on. I understand that that's somewhere where we're finding people of all ages converging on a single cause. What does that feel like? What does it look like? What do the different generations bring to the party?
I'm such a fan of cross-generational events, whatever they are. I mean, so I think, yes, you're absolutely right. In the activism movement, age does not matter. You have people in their 90s doing this for their great-grandchildren, and you have children there, you know, as well. And I love that, but it's not new to me. It's something that I've always tried to nurture I love the sound of the village school. I need to find out more about that. But it's something that I've always tried to do. And my parents are both activists. They both get involved. They come on marches with us. And I just think, like what we've said so far in the podcast, I just think that is the way to make, I mean, age doesn't matter, to make ageless things happen.
Yeah.
I've just never been interested in people's ages. I'm interested in what they have to say.
I noticed, Sarah, you're nodding. You are also an activist, or I should say a craftivist. We have the Britain's leading craftivist in the room. Sarah, I don't know if we've got a microphone, but Sarah, is it similarly kind of, say a bit about what the work you do, which is fantastic. Sarah was one of our first guests on the podcast, and is a genius. I think there is a genius to what you do, particularly when Holly said, to do it with love. Say a little bit about what you do, and is it intergenerational?
Yeah, and if it's not, I'm doing it wrong. So it definitely is. I do a thing called craftivism, which is activism through handicrafts, and it's all about slow activism. So I'm a big fan of Carl up there, and wrote about him in my last book. But my approach to craftivism, because there's lots of approaches out there that are not loving, is called gentle protest. And I particularly target people who are scared of activism, don't see themselves as activists, often don't see themselves as political, which makes them even more politically influential, and influential with business leaders as well. And my last climate campaign, which we talked about on your podcast, one of the things I loved about it was so intergenerational. And on top of that, it was because it was reaching people who don't do activism very specifically. I actually told a lot of activist groups I know, I had to phone them all up to say, please don't get involved, because if you do, other people won't. And I loved that it was intergenerational. We had one family in a conservative area, because we have a conservative government, so obviously we were targeting them before COP in Glasgow, and all 3 generations of the family associated with different political parties and had never been able to talk about politics or climate before without someone leaving the room or people screaming at each other. And they took part in our canary craftivism project in a little flock dressed as canaries and making gifts for their MP to say, don't leave it too late, we believe in you. And it really got them discussing why the grandmother was concerned about her grandchildren, why the grandchildren wanted to know about how much the grandparent loved nature and what was that about, and how actually it didn't matter what political persuasion they all had a common cause, but they were coming from different experiences and different hopes, but all had this common cause of we want a happy, healthy, harmonious planet, which was what we want in the world. We don't want everyone agreeing with each other in the world. It's never going to happen. But we want people to find that common cause and that loving respect of difference. And you could see them learning so much from each other, which was really lovely.
And Sarah, is the essence of that the craft, is the making, the love goes into the object? What is it?
It's a mix. So the process is all handicraft, so the repetitive action to slow down and calm down and turn your reactive energy of sadness and anger into something proactive, and using the process for critical thinking on your own or in a group. And the lack of eye contact means you're more challenging to each other and you can listen to each other more because you're not giving eye contact and feeling like you've got to respond straight away. But then they made themselves canary beaks and little capes to wear and to sit in their local constituency in a public space as a small group, not to be a disruption and not to threaten people or be in the way, but for people to go, why are you all dressed in yellow and stitching, and really quiet and not asking us to do something or standing with placards. So it intrigued passers-by to come in. It was great for social media. But also they made a handmade small life-size canary for their MP to give it to him in his constituency, office, which him and his office are not used to. Most politicians are not used to bespoke handmade gifts that are positive and loving to say, we know you've got a difficult job, but this is your reminder that this is a ticking time bomb on the world. And, you know, canaries were taken out of the coal mines by their coal miners who loved their canaries because their canaries would sing and they'd sing together and they genuinely wanted them not to be harmed or die. So the canaries were there to support the coal miners from harm, but actually the coal miners, and there's some beautiful quotes from decades ago of coal miners in America and Canada as well as the UK, saying how their canaries, yes, saved their health and helped them, but the motivation was to save their beautiful little canary and put them in these shoe boxes with oxygen in to help them, you know, not be ill. So there was a lovely message around this handmade, small, always small, not big and preachy. And we need the big preachy stuff as well. This is not to replace other forms of activism, but it was the mix of the process on your own and together, the public space, intrigue and people, the conversations, and trying to be a critical friend with your MP rather than an aggressive enemy, which we need all of those areas of activism covered. And it was even more powerful for the MP to see that one of the people that made him the gift was a voter of his, and a couple of the others were potential voters of his or probably wouldn't vote for him. But it, you know, it makes you think, oh yikes, my constituents, these are voters and future voters. I might need to, you know, at least pretend I'm listening to them.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you, sir. Fantastic. Fantastic. Just before you go, before I let you go, your book is called?
I have a book out called How to Be a Craftivist, The Art of Gentle Protest. And I'm writing a project book at the moment, which is a handbook of 20 projects you can pre-order as well. Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, well, I didn't know you were going to be here, but so we couldn't let you pass. Thank you so much. Time is moving on. We are all getting older by the minute.
Quickly, not slowly.
Just quickly, not slowly. I wanted to come back to you, Carl, because you started saying that the book was this book, as all of them, was kind of stimulated by an existential uncomfortableness. Could you share with us how you now feel about, you know, personally about age, about the London Jets? I mean, has it? The book is full of evidence that things have changed. I'm just interested in how you changed, how it changed you.
It did work for me. I mean, there's always a danger when I go into one of these books that I come out with a piece of work that stands on its own 2 feet rationally, but doesn't change me at all. But that wasn't the case here. I mean, I've had a 180-degree swivel in terms of how I think about age. Before writing Boulder, I was a card-carrying member of the cult of youth. I mean, I would never have given my age. I would have lowballed it. You know, I just felt awful about the whole idea of growing older. I just pushed it away. And now I feel really genuinely, completely at ease with it. My metaphor now for aging is, I think, I'm not a gamer at all, but I have a gaming analogy that I think of, which is that I think of each year of my life now as a level in a game. So right now I'm at level 55, and I am enjoying level 55 to the hilt. I'm gathering as much treasure as I can have. I'm enjoying all the adventures. I'm getting glittering swords. I'm doing crafts. I'm doing all the things you do at level 55. And occasionally I might look back and think, there were a couple of things that really lit me up in level 29. Feel a nice warm feeling, but I don't think I want to go back to level 29, right? I'm happy in level 55. I'm actually thinking level 56 is waiting for me down the road. What is there in level 56? So it's that kind of feeling of, rather than aging being a downward spiral to depression, decrepitude, dementia from the age of whatever, 35, where are we drawing the line these days? I think of it as an upward swing now to some sunny uplands somewhere. And I think that's not Pollyannish. I don't think it's utopia, and I don't think it's Panglossian. I think it's perfectly reasonable to feel that way, because every age has its pros and cons, but every age can be glorious, can be wonderful, but only if we embrace it, sort of embrace that level in the video game, or embrace the present without pining for the past or shrinking in horror from the future. And for me, it's been a complete and utter game changer with a capital G. So, yeah, playing with the London Jets, one of my teammates is sitting in the front row.
Hey. Is he as good as he says he is?
He's pretty good. He didn't say still, you know. He's learned a thing or two this evening. So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and you know, I'm often working in businesses, and I'll cheekily ask them. I have a little game that Charles Handy showed me, and it tricks you into drawing the line of your life and putting an X where you are on it. And most people put themselves in the middle. And I like asking them, how do you know you're in the middle? How do you know you're middle-aged? I mean, you might be, but you might not be. It might end tomorrow. And I wonder how our feeling about our age is predicated on how long we think we've got left. And I'm reminded of a very wise man saying to me, his wife was concerned. He had a heart problem, and he wanted to go to Israel and see his father on his 100th birthday. And she was worried that he would drop dead on the trip. And he said, I'm the kind of man that wants to be able to answer yes to the question, is today a good day to die? I'm the kind of man that wants to be able to answer yes to the question. And so whilst he wasn't in a hurry to die, I sense a little bit in you this sense of relish level, the level you're at. You don't know how long you've got. And having a long way to go doesn't necessarily make it better. Now is the time that you need to relish.
But just coming full circle to what you were talking about earlier, how we seem to have added a decade and a half, 2 decades of good, healthy living to many of our lives, and just rewritten the code for human life, the arc of a human life. I only recently did the arithmetic with my own life, and I'm now 55. And if you think that's 35 years older than 20, right? I'm expecting, given my longevity, my family to get to 88, 89. So basically, I've got another 35. So I'm halfway through my adult life, which when you just rotate the world and look at it from that angle, you think, goodness me, I actually have a lot of time left. Which brings with it a thrill, but can also be daunting, I suppose, as well, if you feel...
Especially if you don't get things sorted out. This is going into an interesting place. Yes. I think possibly it's time to head to the bar, but before that, I would like to sing another song, if that's all right.
You must sing another song.
I will sing another song, which is an Italian song. It's like Coming Home. Have we got a song in us? So there's a song called Ideale, which again is it's nothing of what you've just said. It's a guy yearning for something that's just out of reach, and hoping that she'll come back to him. So, but it produces good plangent music, yearning.
Love plangent.
So let me sing that, and then we'll.
Before you do that, can I just say that we won't get a chance to say it. I was feeling as I listened to you before, thinking, wonderful, beautiful. If only this were the voice, and I would be Will I Am, and the big button, I would have. So I'll do a little.
Thank you.
Presumably you bring it in the second song.
I've found myself watching on YouTube Britain's Got Talent auditions. Yes. And I don't know what the golden buzzer is, but it seems to make people go crazy. Have you seen them do that, where they hit the golden? In fact, it reminds me of David saying way back when we were in a rehearsal room together. And he said, I think there might be a television show in auditions. If only. If only you'd got there before Simon Cowell. So Ideale, we'll do Ideale. I'd like to sing Ideale for you. Okay. Thank you. My singing teacher's not watching. My singing teacher's not watching.
My character is certainly
Io ti seguigo, mi ride di pace lungo le vie del cielo. Io ti seguì come un'amica face della notte nel velo. Io ti sentì nella luce, nell'aria, nel profumo dei fiori, e fu piena la stanza solitaria di te, dei tuoi splendori. interrupito al suon della tua voce, lungamente sognai, e della terra ogni affanno, ogni croce, in qual sogno scordai. Torna, caro ideal, torna un istante a sorridermi ancora, e a me risplenderà il tuo sembiante una novella aurora, una novella aurora. Torna, caro ideal,
Bravo. Bravissimo.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. It's very nice to be able to have you to sing to. Thank you so much. In case you're wondering what you can say to me afterwards, just say that was bold.
Yeah.
That's all I mean. And thank you, Carl. We made it happen. We started talking about this actually, I think, back in COVID days.
Yeah, it's at a long gestation.
But it was great. It was great that you could come and join us. I didn't mention your TED. You've just done a TED series of
TED course on slowing down. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to slow down, he is the man. The praise of slow changed the world, I think. And let's hope the Boulder does the same thing. Carl Honoré, thank you so much. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's turn on the lights. Let's have a drink. Let's celebrate. Thank you so much, and a happy birthday those of you who have birthdays this year. Enjoy them. Thank you so much.